lively, but we have yeah. I really don't know much to hear about.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Reynolds Memorial Baptist Church in Sperryville, which has kindly provided this generous space for us today for this Foothills Forum Rappahannock News community discussion on transportation. And in particular, Doug and Joanne of Reynolds and Pastor John, who I just learned 1 second ago came to Rappahannock County to be the Rappahannock news editor back in the 1980s. I should not have learned that because I'm going to be calling on Pastor John now for some help. We welcome as well our online viewers who are watching today as this forum streams live via the facebook.com Rappahannock News site. My name is John McCaslin. I am the editor of the Rappahannock News, and we also have on hand today the newspaper's publisher, Dennis Brack, and Luke Christopher, who is the man behind the video camera and all the still shots you see in the Rappahannock News. So Luke, thank you for everything that you do. Randy Ryland is here today, of course, when not writing special story packages on behalf of Foothills Forum and the Rappahannock News. He is a digital media strategist and contributing writer in innovation for Smithsonian.com, among other hats that he wears. His several series to date that have appeared in the Rappahannock News have concentrated on issues that Rappahannock residents themselves have identified as the most serious and important for this county and its population. The latest extensive two-part series, we have copies up here on the table, titled Going Nowhere, centers on the lack of transportation for many who live in Rappahannock County. That said, there are several devoted volunteer drivers in Rappahannock who are standing by and indeed transporting those in need, many of them here today, as I've seen. And talk about transporting, we're talking about to the distance of thousands of miles every month, as Randy points out in his series. Part 1, if you want to look at that specifically. Part 2, which appears in this week's issue of the News, examines specifically how other rural communities like ours are dealing with transportation challenges. I'm particularly interested in hearing from Randy about one such successful transportation service down in southwestern Virginia, which enjoys a tremendous fleet of buses and drivers that, from what I gather, is funded heavily by federal and state dollars funding, which has me wondering if there's not more money out there for Rappahannock County that we have not pursued, something we will ask Randy about. But before we introduce and hear from Randy, who will provide us with an overview of the series, we have several sponsoring organizations with us today, apart from Foothills Forum and the Rappahannock News, and we'd like to give them a few minutes to introduce themselves and frame the transportation issues in the context of their organizations, and they're sitting at the head table today. They are Rapid Home, the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission, and the Rappahannock Senior Center. Thank you all for being here. And rest assured, we will have plenty of time during this forum for open discussions with and questions from the audience. But first, would Rappahannock please provide a few introductory remarks? And I have to my right Dennis Perry, who is the Vice President.
Thank you, John. First, we appreciate being invited to be a co-sponsor. Where's Bud? Bud, thank you. Rappahannock is an organization that assists seniors in staying in their homes and having social connection, serving the county and areas immediately adjacent to the county. We do furnish transportation services for our members, principally for medical appointments, but it can be for other reasons as well. But there are many, many unmet needs in the county, and indeed among our members. One of the, I don't know if it's so much an unmet need, but one of the challenges is sorting out who does what. If you read in the paper, you saw that there are multiple organizations furnishing services, but you almost need to set up a matrix to figure out who will serve what particular needs in what particular areas of this part of Virginia. FANS helps a lot in sorting that out, but it's still fairly complex. Second, we have gaps. We have gaps for, this isn't a Rappahannock issue because many of our members are retired, but people in this county trying to get to work in another county is a problem if they don't have an automobile or a well-functioning automobile. Transportation for social purposes is also one of the gaps here. Again, it's met a little bit by the organizations out there, but not enough. And the social isolation is one of the things that was highlighted in the newspaper articles. We have some inefficiencies in what we're doing. Just coordinating where the volunteers are with where the need for transportation is. You have somebody from Chester Gap going down to Slate Mills. There's a lot of dead mileage in there, and that happens on occasion. When you have folks being taken to medical appointments or in for procedures, you may have someone starting in Rappahannock, going to, say, Fredericksburg or Culpeper, waiting for 5, 6 or more hours, and then coming back, or else making 2 round trips, or having 2 volunteers doing it. So it's, I don't know how you get by that, but it is a problem. And finally, and this is mentioned in the articles, all these organizations right now are vetting their own drivers. And it's putting my lawyer hat on, which I pretend to be on occasion. The organizations need to be sure that the drivers are licensed. They ought to check the driver's record, and they also ought to assure that the driver has certain levels of insurance. And that costs money to do that. It's not a lot of money, but it costs roughly $30 for each state where the driver lives. And some drivers, particularly in this area, have both DC and Virginia residences. And when you have multiple organizations doing that, that cost adds up. So there is an initiative underway to rationalize that and have one centralized service for vetting drivers, and that's something we need and would save hundreds of dollars a year for each of these organizations.
Dennis, thank you very much. From Rappahannock, we're going to go to the Rappahannock-Rapidan Regional Commission. Jenny Pache oversees the FAMS project. A few minutes, please.
Yes, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be involved with this dialogue. The Regional Commission serves the 5 counties of Culpeper, Orange, Madison, Rappahannock, and Foothills. And we try to help with planning on housing and environmental issues and tourism, but we also have a transportation committee called FAMS, which is an acronym for the Foothills Area Mobility System. And anybody can be on it, so if this is something that interests you, please let me know. We'd be happy to include you in these meetings. But it's comprised of transportation providers, human service agencies, nonprofits, businesses, anybody who's got an interest in transportation, whether it's employment transportation or social transportation, public transportation. And we try to get together once a quarter and look at what we have, what we don't have, what we need, what's working, what's not working. And we try to support, expand, and improve transportation in our 5 counties. The Regional Commission also applies for grants, so we've had some funds, both from the federal, state, and local nonprofits to try and support initiatives. Right now we have funding through the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation to operate a one-call center. It's located in Culpeper, but it serves the 5 counties. And the call center doesn't provide any transportation, but it offers free information and referral on all available public, private, and volunteer transportation. So if you or someone you know needs transportation, they can give us a call. The number is 540-829-5300, and I believe we've got some brochures on the table back there. And you'll be connected with one of our mobility specialists, and you just let them know where you're at, where you need to go, when you need to go, and then they can let you know if you can use public transportation, if there's a taxi cab that can take you, and if those options don't work, which or a panic, that would be true. Then we try to see if we can set you up with volunteer transportation. And so, again, the volunteer programs have different requirements. Some have to be medical appointments, some have to be for the elderly or the disabled, but we try to match it with what's available. And then if nothing's available, we still appreciate the call because then we track that. And if we can identify, so when we do have grants available, we try to prioritize what's the biggest need right now, and then we can try and prioritize that way. So we do appreciate, even if we can't help you, getting that information so we can track that and have that available. We also offered free travel training, so if you were to take one of the public transportations and you're unfamiliar with how to use the bus and the bus schedule, we can ride with you until you're felt comfortable navigating on your own. We also operate the commuter services program at the Regional Commission, so if you or someone you know wants to find a ride share or a carpool or a van pool to DC, we can try and connect you with what's available. So again, we don't provide any transportation ourselves, but we try to be a resource for information on referral and data on needs and unmet needs. And then we try to go after funding to develop projects and kind of get them off the ground with the hopes that if they're successful, then we can ask local government or a nonprofit or somebody to sustain them after that.
Thank you, Jenny, very much. Our 4th of 5 sponsors today, as well as the Rappahannock Senior Center, and we have Darcy Canton. Darcy.
Thank you all for including me in this. I'm kind of the boots on the ground person, having to do with the rides in Rappahannock because that's part of what we do at the Senior Center. Unfortunately, one of the biggest things that I deal with is that nobody knows that. We're just kind of tucked away down there, and everybody thinks it's just the people that come to the Senior Center that have availability to the rides, and that is not true. We have 3 programs set up that are county-wide, and anybody in the county that is a senior is eligible for rides. They are all run by volunteers, I mean, they are all driven by volunteers. We do have a reimbursement program that is in conjunction with the Benevolent Fund to be able to give gas cards to drivers that do wish that. I don't even know who they are because somebody else on the outside, I calculate all the mileage and send it to someone else and they take care of that for me. They hit up the Benevolent Fund for the cards and send it out. So people that want to drive, but financially that's something that's a struggle for them, there is an incentive to keep them driving. The 3 programs that we have in short form, there is Rap Med Rides, wrap rides, and then there's also driving through the senior center to pick up meals, which doesn't directly impact everybody here. But the Med Rides program is, again, a lot of the same things that you spoke about, trying to match up a driver that lives in Woodville to take somebody that lives near Woodville to go to Culpeper versus driving an Amosville person all the way over to Woodville to drive all the way back to Warrenton to go to the doctor. So I have about a pool of 25 drivers that I pull from and try to match it up. It doesn't always work. Sometimes we got to run across county and it's a lot of extra miles. But we take people to doctor's appointments. Sometimes they are long sits and they are a lot of time, but the volunteers know that, and if that's not okay with them, then we don't do. We get a second driver to go pick the person up. It's been working, but minimally used, if I can say it that way, in small form. It's only me organizing all the drivers, and so it's a good thing there isn't a million of them, but I know that there are a lot of people out there that need rides that still don't know that they can call. And if they call down to the Culpeper number, to the one call center would call me, and then I would contact the person. So even if they didn't call me directly, I would end up with the call. And then, so we are coordinating much better than we used to. And even the Rapid Home people and I, on certain people, we've been catching up and trying to do. So that's medical rides, and they go to anywhere. We've gone into DC, we've gone down to Charlottesville, we do whatever, if I can find a driver willing to do. If I can't find one, then I call one of the other agencies that's doing that, and we try to make sure that we get people rides, as long as we have enough notice. And then we started with Hal Hunter. Where are you, Hal? There you are. Hal and his energetic little Energizer Bunny batteries, he never stops. He started the program a few years ago with taking seniors to go shopping. So we now do runs, and they aren't just on Fridays. We started it out as just Fridays. We have revamped it sort of as Fridays, but basically any seniors that need to do shopping, need to go to the bank, need to do whatever they need to do, can call, and we work on coordinating something for them to go shopping. Sometimes it is a carpool. There might be 3 other people in the car with them, and it's a day out, and it gets them out of their social isolation. Sometimes it's an individual. We've been able to match up a few of my new drivers that signed up that wanted specific things. We were able to match them up with people who had specific needs. And now they coordinate, they keep me in the loop so I can keep statistics on what's going on, but they communicate with each other now, and they're happy. That's what they wanted. You know, both sides wanted that. I try to protect the drivers and protect the people that are driving, so that, the people that are riding and the drivers, so that there isn't, because what tends to happen is we get people that are we get a lot of needy people, and they latch onto one person, and then that's who they call all the time, and they burn somebody out. So I try to run interference in the middle to field those things to other people, so that nobody gets taken advantage of one way or another. But some people are okay with connecting the other way, and then we let that happen. But so that's been happening a lot lately. I have a couple of people that are exceptionally needy, but again, they're people that I know. Where are all the other people? We're out in the county. We have all these people that still need somebody and still need help, and they either don't know to call or they don't call. And so how do we reach them? That's my big thing. How do we find these people, and how do we reach them? Because we do have things in place. We have Rapid Home, we have us, we have, there's a couple other driving organizations when I can't find what I need. How do we get people to the rides? How do we get the information to the people?
Well, let's try to answer some of that today, and it's very impressive. You and everybody have a lot of balls in the air that you're juggling. Before we get to the author, Bud Meyer of Foothills Forum, Bud, just a few words, please.
Thank you, John. I'll come forward because I want to make sure everybody hears what I have to say, which is mostly thank you for coming out on a Sunday afternoon to care about a topic of concern to the county. You're my kind of people. Thanks. Secondly, I'm going to thank the panelists because you set these issues up quite well. One of the big takeaways I got out of this last series was the way part 1 closed, when Sharon Pierce of Rapid Home was quoted roughly saying, I lose sleep at night thinking about the forgotten people of Rappahannock County. in the context of transportation. It echoes what we just heard from Darcy, echoes what we heard from Dennis about gaps. I would encourage this group to think of this gathering as the first of a possible continuing conversation, a continuing effort in Rappahannock to talk about the transportation issues that these organizations work mightily to deal with, and how going forward as a community with creativity and guile, we might make some headway. I'm also going to close with a bit of a pitch. Foothills Forum is a nonprofit. We work happily in collaboration with the newspaper, but we exist because we raise community support to make this work happen. So if any of you feel it in your heart to think of Foothills Forum in your future giving plans, we would greatly appreciate that, because what it does is puts this kind of thing on the ground and in the paper. So with that, I thank you, John.
Thank you, Bud, for all you're doing. Appreciate it very much. Just very quickly, wanted to note the presence of Rappahannock County Supervisor John Lazinski, who is here today. John, I appreciate you showing up. Thank you very much. And now, without further ado, Randy Ryland. Randy, as usual, quite the undertaking on your part for what you're bringing us today. You've gotten this discussion started, if not continued more. Thank you.
You know, I remember early on in the research of this, I went to Culpeper and met with Jenny, and Jenny said something that just stayed with me, in part because I kept hearing it over and over again when I talked to people in other communities. And that's it. Transportation kind of gets short shrift. It's kind of taken for granted. You know, people say, yeah, I'm interested in healthcare, and I'm interested in this, but and people don't think about, you need to have a way for someone to get to the location, to the service that you're providing, and that's always underestimated and often ignored and neglected. And that gets at the heart of some of this. And then one of the other things that struck me, and actually the term was used, I think you used the term mobility system. I heard that from Valerie Leffler, who was mentioned in the story. When the first time I heard mobility system, I said, mobility system, we're talking about rides. And someone actually said to me, I don't need a mobility system, I need a ride, you know. And I said, well, yeah, I get that. But I think the thing that another aspect of this that I heard a lot about is the need for there to be regional approach to this, for there to be real coordination. And one of the things that's been discussed here already was how within the past, year and a half, since the FAMS call center got going, there's much more coordination among the different groups here. And the one thing Dennis mentioned about trying to, there's been this problem where each group had its own application and its own vetting and its own training, and it was really inefficient. Well, one thing they have done is there's a sole application and now they're in the process, and maybe they've gotten to this point, but they're in the process of...
Yeah, actually, it's one application. If you wanted to volunteer to be a driver, got those over.
No, they're in my book.
We'll bring them there. So yeah, that's helped streamline and make things a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, so, but the thing is, again, that in some other communities, right, I talked to people where they had set up systems. One person had told me, I think this was in upstate New York, when they were setting up the transportation service, when they were getting started on this, they held all these different agencies. So there was an aging agency, and there was a VA agency, and another agency, and they all had vans. You know, and someone said, why don't we just make it into one organization? They said, oh, no. We do our own thing. And that's always been kind of one of the impediments that people, I guess the harsh way of saying it, people get territorial. You know, they just feel like this is what we do. But this is, if you're really going to tackle an issue like this, it has to be collaborative. It has to involve a lot of different groups. And it also has to take into account that so many things are interrelated. I did a series on broadband and cell service, I did a series on healthcare, and I did this series, and so many of the same issues came up again and again and again, and there's such a tie among all those things. So someone might say, well, I'm just really interested in transportation, I really don't care about broadband. No, you can't do that. All those things are connected, and I think it's thinking about this in a more holistic way, and I think just what I've learned over time is that people here are problem solvers, but they're problem solvers like, I'm going to deal with this problem here, as opposed to, I'm going to deal with this problem here. And it's a lot harder to get that kind of coordination and collaboration, but it's a thing where you have, in communities like this, you have to find ways where you can be as efficient as possible. And transportation in rural areas is innately inefficient. Again, the guy in upstate New York, he said they only started to work for them where they could start to do pools, where they could have multiple people riding at one time. But he said, doing the one-offs, you can't do it. You just can't make it work. Now, you know, every place is different. Every place has to find their own way to do it. And I will say this, that in all the volunteer services we're talking about here, there's not a fee for rides. In many other communities, there's a fee. It may be a small fee. It may be $1 or you know, $10, whatever it might be. And that is what distinguishes this area from some of the other areas I spoke with. There was, I think I have a line in this second part about how so much of the future may be built around software, which maybe sounds kind of odd when you're talking about transportation, but so much of this is how you take this data, who needs what, when, and how, and coordinate it in a way so you can use the 20 drivers you have, as efficiently as possible. And you find ways to follow up with people who have used your service before, and then they just kind of disappear, you know? It's taking advantage of this information you gather and doing follow-ups and getting the information out there as much as possible. Another issue that comes up again and again, and it's certainly not here, it's everywhere, is building up trust in the people who need the service. People, they need to trust you. Or there's the sense that, I'm too proud to, you know, get a ride from someone. I mean, I can take care of this, don't worry about me. My daughter will come in 3 weeks and she'll take me to the doctor, you know, and that's just not very good for public health, for one thing. And it's not very good for that person. And so I think there's something that Hal helped set up, the meeting here, actually a couple weeks ago, where the idea was, and I know Hal's been focused on this, how do we identify these people? That's what Darcy was talking about too. How do we identify these people who really need this, but they don't know about it? They don't know about FAMS, they don't know about it. They may know about the senior center, but they may not know about the ride service, you know. They maybe have heard about Rapid Home, but you know, they just aren't aware of it, all the opportunities there. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, getting that information out and making people aware of those services and finding those people out there who need it. And it gets into, you know, I'm working on a story for someone else about telehealth and how telehealth is really the key to the future of health in rural areas. And, you know, you get these big programs where there's somebody at the University of Kentucky in their cancer center, and they're talking about, well, we're going to give people tablets, and they'll take their tablets home, and we can monitor them at home, but there's no broadband out here. So it's worthless, you know, so you have this technology that's getting ahead of the infrastructure out in the communities. And even with transportation, you have more of these groups talking about doing some variant of Uber and Lyft, where you have a mobile app in some way. Well, you know, as soon as you say mobile app in Rappahannock County, it's like, good luck with that. And that's really one of the big hurdles. But again, it's allowing people to work together, think collaboratively, and look for ways to coordinate among all the different groups here and understand that these challenges are so much related. If you try to tackle them individually, you make it much, much harder. So, oh, and one thing that, and you may want to ask me about this at some point, John, but you know, the whole idea of grants, this is always a challenge for Rappahannock, getting grants, you know, and in part because it's the income levels. It's the reference to the group in Southwest Virginia. Fortunately for them, they got the start in the 1980s, and it's really there's a lot of poverty there. You're able to take advantage of a lot of grants. And it's just kind of grown over time. It's become like the local organization where everyone makes their donation to this organization. And it's also a 3-county area, but they work very collaboratively. But when I heard when he told me, I forget the number now, it's a big number of buses.
53 or something.
Yeah, I said, are you, wait, I want to get that number right. You have 53 buses out there? He said, oh, yeah. So, you know, but they make it work. But there again, that's a case where they are doing a model where it's, as the story says, it's bus on demand. It's not like you have to stand on the highway and the bus comes by and it's a fixed route. That doesn't work in rural areas. I mean, people told me that again and again. So the alternative is you're driving to people's houses and picking them up. Well, I mean, that's how efficient is that over time? But they made it work. But he did say, the guy I talked to there, Mitch, he said it took a long time to make it work efficiently.
You need the time, and one thing that sticks out in your series along the same line was a quote, I forget from who said that the one bus, not 53, but the one bus they had in Rappahannock County, the plug was pulled on it before anybody really knew it was in existence because they didn't think it was feasible, cost-wise.
Yeah, and that was, the model was largely fixed stops, and when I talked to Kate Fuller about other people, you know, one of the challenges there is people couldn't get to the highway, they couldn't get to the stops, you know, that was the problem. There was no way to get them there to where the bus was going, and so that's why you had the situation where there were 1 or 2 people on the bus, and you know, it wasn't a good optic, people said, well, this is, and the other thing too is the commitment of the county was really low at first, it was 2,000, but it was about to start escalating, and I think that was one of the motivating factors. Okay, we're going to start paying more money, and there's only 3 people riding on the bus, this is crazy. Well, the model didn't work, but I think the interesting thing to me is near the end of the 6 months where they were doing this, they kind of shifted the model and they made it more like the demand model they have in Southwest Virginia, where, yeah, and where you know, people would order the rides X number of days in advance, and the bus would come and pick them up and take them somewhere. And that's kind of the way you have to do that in rural areas. But you know, if you don't do it efficiently, then you're gonna be wasting a lot of money. But I think it's unrealistic to think of any one municipality solving these problems on its own. I mean, it has to be a regional approach. You're much more likely to get grants. But you know, the interesting thing too is when you talk to people in Foothills and people in Culpeper, Rappahannock is always the odd beast. You know, just because of the nature of the county, it's a different place. There's no public transit here, as we know, and every ride is 25 miles,
Yeah.
no matter what. So, anyway.
John Lazinski, I mentioned you before, and I understand you have to leave for another event soon, but given this conversation we're having right now about government involvement along with citizen assistance, do you have any reaction to what's being said and what we can look forward to in the future, perhaps?
Well, I wish we could look forward to something in the future from the government perspective. My observation on this, having read the series and given this more thought and seen the history on it, is that unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, from my perspective, your local government doesn't seem to have much political will to enter into this conversation and put any funds forward for solutions. And that's the opinion of one, but it's from where I sit and what I've observed. So, what I think is so important about what's being discussed here is that, as you've already well articulated, there are many different points of light out there, and you're trying to figure out how maybe these different individual efforts whether they end up being coordinated or there's some idea that rises above another. What I've seen many times, and what I think we may have to do here in Rappahannock County until the government catches up, is that this, whether you want to call it private sector or volunteer effort, has to really be, you know, the one that comes up with the good ideas and puts forward the solutions. And then I'm hopeful that as the climate may change on things in this community, with respect to local government involvement, that we may be able to fund some of these efforts. But you know, I think, speaking very plainly, honestly here, I don't see where one of these great, you know, wonderful organizations that comes before its board of supervisors and asks for funding. I think that's, you know, I don't want to encourage you that would necessarily be successfully received. And I think that's unfortunate, but I think that's the reality of where we are. So, as my old elementary school teacher used to do when they gave us hints on the test, if you have the ability to make change in the way people think and look at things in your community, I would encourage you to take advantage of doing so. And reach out to your supervisor and say, this is a really important issue for our demographic in our county. What are you going to do about it? There are some good ideas bubbling up from, you know, bubbling from the bottom up. What are you going to do to support it?
John, can I ask you just on the subject of grants, speaking as a layman, and Randy pointed out that given the population makeup here and the salaries and the income discrepancy there, higher incomes than local, which makes it difficult to maybe qualify for a grant. What is out there that might be pursued? I mean, you're looking at an incredible promise from the PATH Foundation for a bicycle path here in town. When you have a more pressing problem with this rapidly escalating or growing, I should say, elderly population. And so are there any answers there of any untapped sources of funding for the senior citizens in transportation?
You know, I almost think that the organizations that are working this problem on a daily basis have a better understanding and appreciation of where that money may be coming from. As you saw if you're seeing with the bike trail, the Rap Trails folks, they found that grant money through VDOT. They went out and they did a lot of the heavy research and the heavy lifting to find where the grant money was. And I think grant money sources, you're probably discovering those better than, certainly we haven't done the homework at our level. I don't have the exact answer for that, but I'm pretty sure that there is money out there, whether it's at the federal or the state level. My comment earlier was really more about the local level. But I can't help but also echo what Randy said about broadband being involved in that initiative. You know, we are finding sources of money out there, but what we're really finding is that the private sector folks are becoming more and more aware of Rappahannock's needs and are coming up with solutions to include us with whatever they're doing in Madison or whatever they're doing in Culpeper. So you just have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and if you can find that grant money, or if you can find that, you know, that group or that organization that's done it somewhere else that might be able to add us on here, that's the way I think it's going to happen on this one, you know, as well as it's the way it's probably going to happen with broadband too. They are all, it's so spot on, Randy. It's in healthcare as well. They're all interrelated, and you know, you find one solution there, and it affects the other pieces. And what I've also learned is, whether it's broadband or whether it's this finding a solution for transportation, you're not going to be able to flip one switch and you've found the whole answer. It's going to probably be, you know, a series of solutions, you know, that eventually kind of come, you know, form a, you know, first a patchwork and then a, you know, something a lot more substantial, you know, to fill the needs.
Darcy, John pointed out, you know, that
you know a lot more than we do, Jenny, and that's what has your experience been with grants and funding? Where are they?
My agency, I don't do anything there. The agency does what they do. How do we get?
Jenny's the one.
At one point, my agency funded the whole transportation thing and did the gas reimbursement and everything, but because money got very tight on all the levels that they were getting their money from, they had to abandon some of the things that they had started. But they wanted to keep the program going with the transportation, hence we went to the benevolent fund to draw our money. But that's a good question, and I don't have an answer because I don't. At this point, I haven't done that. Say I'm willing to. If somebody found a resource for it, we can definitely track it. We can definitely go after it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the agent together. We have the regional commission. They will help us do the grant writing, and because Jenny writes grants all the time. So if we can find, if we as a community can find resources, we have help getting the grants written.
Jenny, what is your experience?
So right, there's lots of federal grants, state grants, nonprofit organizations, and they're great to be able to get seed money and to start a project. But unfortunately, for example, with Darcy's program, their volunteer transportation was funded through a federal grant called RSVP, and I apologize, I don't remember.
Retired Senior Volunteer Program.
Thank you. Too many acronyms. So anyway, they got federal funds to operate this volunteer transportation. They had, the volunteers had insurance, secondary liability insurance that was covered for them. They had gas reimbursement. They had money for volunteer recognition. It was a great program, but then, the different turnover with presidencies and just the political climate, things changed.
Well, they urbanized it, and we were rural, so we weren't meeting the criteria anymore for what they wanted for the program. That's exactly what happened. So we had to withdraw out of it because we couldn't jump through their hoops anymore.
So grants are really great in that you're able to start initiatives and try to work out the kinks and get it off the ground and get it so that it's more efficient and it's meeting the most needs, and you can kind of tweak it, but they're not really used for sustainability. So that's kind of the models that police advance committees use for their initiatives. They get a grant, they create an initiative like a call center, and then if they can get it successful enough and it's showing enough benefit, that's why we try to track a lot of data, then we try to take it to local government or the PATH Foundation or the Benevolent Fund, any of these nonprofits to try and get sustainability, because the grants are just really volatile, so you can't rely on them for sustainability, but they are great to get it off the ground and get it where it needs to be so that you can go to a board of supervisor and say, this is the impact it's having, these are the benefits, this is your return on investment. It's really hard to do that with just out of the gate.
And that's what happened with the bus, was we had, this is the Virginia Regional Transit, whatever, they came with available money. They put a lot of it up front to help us out to get the bus started way back when. And then, but it was only set up on this trial 6-month thing. And when we finally figured out it wasn't working, point A, we had to go to point, we had to try plan B. There wasn't enough time to establish any statistics with it, and the sustainability wasn't there for it. It had to bump over to the government, and the government didn't see enough results. The local government, so they nixed it.
We want to,
County does not have a grant writer. That's one other thing
Right.
we get asked about is, hey, can your county government grant writer go ahead and submit?
We talked about that the other day, as a matter of fact, and it wasn't specifically about transportation, but Dennis and I had a conversation about the grant money. It has nothing to do again with this issue, but Luray, Virginia, just tens of thousands of dollars from the state because they are the wedding capital. Somebody wrote that in their grant and they've been awarded. Luray. Main Street in Farm Royal to the tune of 6 figures is now going to be rebuilt. So, obviously it's where it's fallen from the state. I think it's something that you really need to stay in touch with your local lawmaker about and have them go to Richmond and press on your behalf, because a lot of times we don't hear from these guys. I mean, seriously, as the editor of the newspaper, we have to seek out our person in Richmond and our person on Capitol Hill. We think they'd be helping more, or at least maybe they're the ones that need to be approached on this. Questions for anybody? Hal Hunter, I see you're here. You're the reason for so much of this we have today, so thank you for everything that you do.
That's a little scary.
Are there any questions from the audience? Bev, please.
I have a question for Randy. Aside from the pressing issues of access to medical care and especially problems of seniors, it feels like this links to so many other things that people should express concern about, including, as you mentioned, Randy, getting to jobs. I think getting people to community college, people in Rappahannock businesses say they have trouble hiring people because people can't drive here from Front Royal, whatever it is. So looking at it in the context of jobs and young people and allowing families to stay together when young people grow up, did you see any models when you were looking at lots of other communities? Did you see models in the context of jobs or school or workforce movement?
I would say in most of the rural communities, the transportation is built around medical appointments, by far. But there are those exceptions where you might have a large employment center, whether it's a prison or something where you have a lot of people who need to get there. Or there are some cases where part of the transportation system is related to a community college. So that there's, that's part of it. You kind of have to identify what the needs are in the community. I mean, the challenge always with Rappahannock is the numbers are so small for everything. And even the numbers, the Rappahannock, I forget which one it is. No, that's the other one. Yes, regional commission. They have stats on the number of cars that park in the lots, the little full rides, the van rides, and they're so small. They're really so small. I'll be honest, Bev, I wasn't focused as much on that, but where I did talk to people, they almost always said our biggest problem is we're a rural community, we have a lot of older people, and that's where the big challenge is. And as other people have mentioned, it really spills over into social isolation. Some of the volunteer drivers I've talked to, Darcy put me in touch with a number of people, and every one of them said, I didn't realize there were so many people in this community who were living by themselves. And they're just they were really surprised at that, and shocked even in some cases. But I think it's a good question. I think it's overall in rural communities, it's so much of transportation is built around urban areas because it's demand. You're moving a lot of people, you get big numbers, you impress a lot of people. You have to be a lot more resourceful in communities like this. And I think largely in the past, a lot of it was either handled by families or someone's congregation. And they're still an important part of this, but it can't serve the same function that it may have in the past.
Eve?
Well, I was impressed. I went to one of the past meetings that you used to be a part of, Jenny, and I was impressed that the more urbanized counties around us were getting a lot of money for new vehicles. A whole lot of rent. We're not doing it. We're not positioned. We don't have a plan. We don't know who would drive it. I was also impressed that a similar organization to Rapid Home in this region has a van that came from the regional commission. It's a smaller community, Lake of the Woods or something, and the organization that's similar to Rapid Home is running that van. Not just for its members, but around that community. Am I correct?
Right, so they don't actually own the van, it's still owned by the Community Services Board, but because they collaborated and partnered They're leaving the van at Lake of the Woods so that they can use it for their own village model. But then they're also willing to drive anybody else in Orange County who needs transportation. So it's kind of a win-win. They get to
It's something we have explored, but we do have the volunteers, and I presume there's still another van, unless they think that the van that you have is it.
Well, there are other vans, and that is something that could be pursued, because we used to have a handicap accessible van that sat in Rappahannock County for a long time. We had a lockbox over the link, and to drive people that needed wheelchair accessibility, because most of my drivers don't have that, and it didn't get used. So they ended up moving it back down to Culpeper, and it is available. If somebody would call me and my driver cannot accommodate them, then I can get that van set up on schedule, and somebody will drive up and get them. So those are available, and yes, if we have a better system set up with people actually using it, that is the thing. It just sat. We had it for a couple of, maybe 3 months or 4 months.
Would software help on this to maximize what's available? Last time we talked, you were doing it all by hand.
I'm still doing a lot of it by hand, but they do have it. It is set up in a system down at one call center. Just with me, with my drivers, is set up all by hand. But no, because it isn't. The people that call, we meet their need. It's getting the people to call, and it is a trust issue. So the people that I know will call me because they know me, but the people that don't know me, or don't know you, or don't know whomever, won't. They just don't, or they don't know about it one way or the other. So there are a lot of factors involved. It isn't just having the van, because we've had the van.
Yes, sir.
I'm often involved in education together as a number of people are here, and we've talked about this for years. And I'm heartened by the fact that more progress is being made. We're thank God for plans, and we're starting to look at what all is out there, what's available, so we know what some of the resources are. I don't see that there's been any move, like taking together is not being the organization to do that, but a move to do a real clear needs assessment and track.
I think Sally said, didn't she say, Sally Martin, didn't she say there's a needs assessment coming?
Yeah, Carol finished up the grant. Carol wasn't able to make a meeting because she was writing a grant, but she's writing a grant to try to get these assessments done in Fauquier, Northern Culpeper, and in Rappahannock.
It's time.
So I hope that it includes organizations like the church, which provide a lot of grants we don't know about. But if we're going to be asking for grants for looking at other needs and transportation, I think we need to know what the full needs are.
I'll put you in touch with her and you can talk to her and share it.
But
I have 2 housekeeping things to mention and a question. Housekeeping thing number 1, I'm sitting in the back, I'm having a hard time hearing, so if we could just elevate the volume a little bit to share what we're hearing around the room, that would be great. Second, when you ask a question, let us know who you are and what your organization is so that we've got a sense of who's in the room. So I appreciate that. But partly to Danny Wilson's point and other things that I've heard from Darcy, this is strikingly a supply and demand issue or a scale issue, similar to so many things that Randy has written about regardless of the issue in Rappahannock County. The supply is, there are organizations out there represented here and out there providing the services, but the demand is the missing part. People that Darcy talked about, that Sharon talked about, that are out there that don't know. So I'd like to hear from the organizations like Hal and others about your efforts to do the outreach. I'm just trying to be creative here. What are the greatest common threads that have reached to the 7,400 citizens of Rappahannock County? We've got government. People have to pay taxes, so there's communication from the government to the citizens. People use utilities, so there's RAC, REC electric. there are the schools that educate our students, and I'm wondering about the ways to reach all factors of the community through the broadest means possible, with messages that get to as many households as possible that say, if you or your neighbor or your mother or your aunt needs a ride, we've got the possibility to make that happen. I'd like to hear more about efforts to expand that outreach and find those forgotten people that Darcy talked about.
Why don't we turn to Hal on that, because you had this meeting about 6 weeks ago that was very well attended.
Okay. The only group that I'm aware that has a paid, no kidding, we're actively going after it, is the Benevolent Fund. They have a woman, half-time life, whose job it is to go out and find people who are socially isolated and living by
Now,
themselves.
those people come in, and she picks them up when they come in because they're having
But
health
her job
problems.
is to find them.
No, her job is not to find them. Her job is when they come to the, when they come to the Benevolent Fund, she will help them not only by giving them a small grant for what they're doing, but she will look at what kinds of other problems and crises they're in the middle of.
Well, let me say that there are people who are taking this job on a more systematic broadband, and I'm with them and we're trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, but part of the meeting that I took away from the article that I read in the Rappahannock News was more of an organizational, as Bud's talking about, streamlining, getting everybody together. How do we communicate with each other better? Because if that's confusing for just the board members, think how confusing it is for somebody in Harris Hollow that doesn't know who to call. And that's what you made.
That's the question that we're working on. There's the organizations that wait until somebody knocks on their door and says, please give me some services. And how do you get that information out?
Right.
That's one question. And the other one is finding the people who need the services and convincing them that it's okay to accept the services, and that's the tough part.
It's helping, we need the connector people in the community to help connect the services that we have to the people that need it, but that the people are going to trust. And then a lot of what we found is a lot of people, not a lot, but there are an amount that are not capable of navigating all of that on their own. And they need some help navigating, getting to whatever it is. You can't just give them a phone number and say, here, call us, because they call and they're like, who am I talking to? Where am I?
Right.
And then they call back and they still don't know which person they've talked to. They can't navigate it on their own. So Monsi is the navigator. She's a navigator. She takes the people that have come into the system where somebody has turned to her, and she helps them navigate the system. And that is a very good job.
Right now, we're trying to collect case studies of people like this to see what we can do, and Darcy and I were talking about that before this meeting.
John Lazinski.
Folks, you may have this connector piece already here. It's your fire and rescue piece. Okay? Fire and rescue has 7 companies in this community. And I guarantee you, they know where, they probably more than anybody else in this community know where everybody is. They probably knocked on that door at some point, and oh, by the way, they probably happen to be the same people that you're trying to reach for the service that you're providing. So I don't know what the different organizations have done as far as coordinating with the fire and rescue companies in this county, but if you talk to the chiefs or if you go to the association, oh, and guess what? They are the experts in this county at grant writing.
Yeah, but they also have a problem with confidentiality. So they will know people.
Well, I understand HIPAA. I mean, I know what that is. I get that, Betty, but I'm sure there are things, I mean, they can, distribute literature, or they can make sure that if they make a call on somebody, hey, are you aware that these services are available in your community? I mean,
John, I think you gave the point further. It is almost impossible for a public or private agency to go into a someplace and say, you're poor, we're here to help. It's difficult, if not impossible. So what you need to think about is grab a hold of precipitating events. You know, as soon as you get somebody coming into the system through the call, the rescue squad, or the church, or some way, then you can work with them. And that, in fact, is what Monty does at the budget fund. If somebody comes in for a grant, and it looks like they can be helped in other ways than just financially, then Monty begins to work with them. And Monty can tell them about these kinds of services. But you can build on that kind of system if you get the various agencies that meet these people at the precipitating events to buy into your system.
Yes, sir.
Mike Weger, I have no organization except me. I heard Hal and Darcy both talked about three kind of categories of people out there. One, they just need the information, so we've got to reach them. Two, they need the information, but they also need help navigating the system, so we need to support them in the navigation. And three, you've implied, but we haven't talked about explicitly, people that would rather die in their home alone than accept a ride from somebody they don't know. Do we have in our collective experience any kind of feel for how big each of those relative groups might be? Because it really does, is an information problem? Is it a motivation problem? It really does characterize the kind of effort that we need to do.
Yeah.
So, we know.
Want to tackle that?
We had a fourth group,
Okay.
like middle-class people, and not people who are always in crisis. Because I think if we think not about the poor, but about what we all need to get around, and especially if my husband was sick and I was trying to take care of him, I don't know who I'd turn to, except for Rappahannock now. I think that if you turn this around and don't make it them and us, and make it something that serves us all, we get a very different kind of answer. And it's that kind of answer that I think will serve more of us, and politically will sell. So that's the fourth group. And there are probably a lot of us in there.
Jonathan?
The short answer is we don't really know. A needs assessment, which I didn't know that was going on, that would be very helpful. Just looking at the stats though, with the number of people in this county over 50 and the number over 65, and that was in the article, and the increase in that number, you'd think the demand has to be there. And one of the things that we have encountered at Rapid Home is we'll go out and talk to people about membership and how we can help you stay in your home if bad stuff happens. And we've actually changed our pitch a little bit, because that's certainly part of what we do, but we're also talking a lot about the social part of what we do. One of the, which we have, and it's important, but people don't like thinking about the bad stuff that's going to happen to them as they get older. So part of what we've been dealing with is denial. It's not just a river in Egypt.
That's a very good point.
Gentleman Thompson, I don't have any profile either, except for Foothills. Some of the things that have been said here got my brain going. We're so used to being Rappahannock and we're small and poor, we don't have anything. We can't get it if you don't need numbers. Something was said here that really struck something to me. We often have more demand, more resource than we have demand. And I think that's true. And it's been true a long time, 40 or so years ago. One of our church members got fired up about this English program called Fish, the churches. We got many of the churches organized in this community. We got volunteers to do things. put a phone down the hall here, because 97 was the one you could call the most free calls from. And we had, you would call that, and we'd tell you who to actually call that day, who was in charge. And after about 2 or 3 years, we closed it down because nobody would call. And volunteers giving up their whole day and waiting. Even the biggest problem is how do we connect with the people? Quite honestly, those of us who have some means think these things are not for us. And the other people aren't sure about it. And I think the biggest number one issue here probably is that connection. Getting those connectors. And the other thing that was said, it takes time. That's what Randy said about the folks in Southwest Virginia or whatever. It takes time to get people used to. So if I actually stick my neck out and take a ride from somebody one day, I go tell my friend Betty, she might take one too. It's that kind of, there's a lot of work here that's deeper than coming up with a bus. That's kind of got me in my brain on.
So Jenks, what you're saying, and John pointed this out as well, the importance of the outreach as one avenue with the local fire departments, along with the churches, and I know your church, heck, they're volunteering in Haiti, for God's sake. So there are the people like you. Let me ask the panel up here, if not the fire services, how much coordination is there with the local churches, which know these communities a lot better than the rest of us?
Well, there's a fair amount at the moment. There is a group of clergy who meet on a monthly basis. The Benevolent Fund still is a church-based organization. Really, the majority of
Actually out of the Episcopal Church in Washington, right?
No.
It's on itself.
We are a 501c3 organization, but our board is in fact made up of most of the 5 years and a couple of us civilians. We're not necessarily a church.
Right.
Well, you got the HIPAA problems with fire and rescue, but they can tell people about it.
Yes.
And if you can equip them to give you, just give them the family numbers or something. You can equip them because I don't know, I ran 60% of the calls for Washington Fire Department for 10 years. How many times you get a sense that if these people had gotten to the doctor last month, they wouldn't have been called the rest of them. So it's certain. Yeah. Well, we have the frequent flyers too. That if you can help them understand, not just something that they can do for the community, but something that serves their purpose, that could be an important way to get some of this out.
John, I want to question your premise. You were assuming that the churches know where the people who need services are, and I forget where I heard it, but I think I heard it indirectly from the Benevolent Fund that the churches are experiencing somewhat of the same frustration of not knowing where the need is. And I've heard somewhere, and I'm sorry I can't remember where, that there are a lot of folks in the county who are not affiliated with the church.
Well, I think that's the important part.
And there are a lot of churches in the county that don't talk to them. I mean, there's like 50 churches in this county or something. The Benevolent Fund, the work there is like, 10 of us or something. I don't know, Betty knows more the numbers.
No, it's not that many.
Yeah. It is hard sometimes. But then again, having lived in Washington for all those years, and the rectory and everybody knew what it was, you didn't have to be a part of the church to knock on the door with it. So that does happen.
Nobody's taking more notes today, so I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Wendy Oyen, and I work at the FAMS Call Center. So we're, like Darcy, we're boots on the ground as well. And I'm thrilled that we're all here today. It's wonderful to hear these ideas. I've had a lot of help from Hal. He's helped me navigate this community in particular. And I've spoken to the EMS and fire rescue people. I've given out a lot of what's over there. And so, we put forth effort for that. I've talked to the church lady at their monthly meeting. And I've canvassed a lot of the churches. I've put on a lot of miles in this county, and I've felt kind of criminal sneaking into these little churches that I don't know if I should be in there or not. But I'm leaving packets, and if their doors don't open, I'm leaving packets underneath their mats and hoping it doesn't rain. So, but yeah, so I've been out there a lot, and I know that there's a level of frustration that we're not finding people, but honestly, our calls are increasing. And I know that in a community like this, where we have, is it 7,000 people, and and there's more cows than people, but it takes a while. It definitely takes a while. I've been at the free clinic in Rappahannock. It's open on the third Wednesday of every month, and I was there for a good 7 months solid, and it took me about the first 5 months before anyone would talk to me. So, so I do know, but the people there started talking to me, and so it is slow, but it is possible. And I agree with you, Bev, that I do think that one of the things that we can do is look at what benefits the entire community, and that's a really good approach. And I also think that we do need to lead by example. And I always think about, do you remember that annoying commercial back in the 70s? I think it was for shampoo. And they told two friends, and they told two friends, and so on, and it kept growing. I do think that that's what needs to happen in Rappahannock, because there really are no central avenues where you can get the information dispersed to everyone at the same time, nor are you going to be able to get people to use what you have put out there, unless a friend says, I tried it, and you should try it too. So I challenge you to take some of the swag over there, take some magnets, take some flyers, give it to a friend, use it yourself. And then the other thing that we've found in the last couple months is we've gotten a few calls from people who need help getting to employment. And we have a great service called Commuter Services, our Commute, and you can sign up. And most people think of it as, well, I need to ride share with someone, so I'm going to sign up. But I think in Rappahannock, it would be great if you all could look at it as, I'm driving to Warrenton already. I'll sign up for this in case somebody needs a ride from me. So it's a different approach, a different thought process. So if you are willing to drive someone from Rappahannock 2 days a week on your way to work, if you would sign up for our Commute, put yourself in the database so that people could find you, and they could say, hey, we had a gentleman call us. Actually, we had 3 neighbors of this gentleman and the gentleman himself call us. He works in Warrenton, he lives in Rappahannock, and if he can't, he's got a ride Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And if he cannot get to work Tuesday and Thursday, he's losing his insurance. And he did go on RapNet, and he found somebody who would drive him. And at first it was working out, and then she said she wanted $70 a week to drive him. And he could not afford that. And so we looked on our Commute. Was there anybody who maybe was going that way? And no, nobody was signed up. So those kind of things are things that you can take action on now, and you can do that. You can take magnets, and you can give it to people that you know. Certainly it doesn't have to be just somebody who's in need, because none of us knows. You could be standing on a chair one day.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And you don't know. You don't know that tomorrow you may be, in a wheelchair because you broke your leg and you need a wheelchair ride.
You poster child?
I broke my foot.
But I did just hear from a gentleman in Foothill who broke his leg the other day and now is in a wheelchair and will need wheelchair transport. Well, nobody plans on that. And as much as you think you can rely on your friends and family, and you can, but when it comes to a need like that, that is enormous. And when you call a service to come and take you and bring you to a doctor's appointment, they can run up to $300 for one trip. I mean, these are things that I do think we have to have a mindset of, this could be for me. And I do think if we do have that mindset, I do think it will start to work. And it is working. I just think because it's Rappahannock, we just have to remember that the pace is going to be different. And accept that that's okay. But we'll just keep plugging away, and I'll show up to any other meetings that Hal tells me to show up to because I trust this guy. Thank you all.
Judge.
Hi, I'm Melissa Cupp, and I work at the Rappahannock Juvenile Court. And I came today to get some more information, and I thank you very much for putting this panel together. I've learned a lot today that I didn't know. But one of the things that I'm thinking about is transportation for kids that are on probation. We have funding in Rappahannock County through the Virginia Juvenile Community Crime Control Act, the VJCCA, and we have a biannual meeting where we have to talk about what services the community needs and where to spend this money that comes to us from the state. So this is the year that we're talking about in the planning board, and one of the things that's come up through our court services unit is transportation for kids in Rappahannock. So there's some great services in Warrenton, but then the question is, how do we transport them there? We looked at it the other way too, with how do we get the services to kids in Rappahannock, but it's not a large number of kids, thankfully. It's only a few kids out here that are on probation. And what the funds are for is to prevent kids from coming into residential placement. So we can use the funds for them to avoid them going into a detention center or worse, or a residential treatment facility. So I came to hear about what's happening in transportation and what transportation options there are, so that I can report back and we can have this conversation about how we can get kids, juveniles, usually 13 to 17-year-olds, to treatment places where they need to go. So I know the conversation is, I would say, primarily talking about elderly folks, but I just want to mention that there are some kids in our community that have transportation needs as well.
Very interesting. And Melissa, if you don't mind me saying, obviously the one question that comes right to mind is, what supervision would there be in transporting these kids on probation to a distance of Warrenton?
Well, that and I did think about that, because some of the kids do have a high level of challenge, a high level of need, but there are some kids that have a pretty low level of need, and they don't need a lot of supervision. I mean, you might have a 16-year-old that's on probation that really doesn't need any supervision and can go to a class in Warrenton by themselves. I did think of another set of people who need transportation, and that is people who are on adult probation, because our probation office is in Warrenton. So if you get a drug charge in Rappahannock and you lose your license, you still have to make it to your probation appointments in Warrenton. So that's hard, but that's difficult for volunteer drivers, because some of the people are going to be people who have personal problems and challenges. So that's another set of people that I think are going to need some help as well. Just to throw another issue to throw out there is that I previously worked with the Department of Social Services and parents whose kids are in foster care. And the last time I was involved directly with the department, we had one foster family in Rappahannock. So all of our other kids that are coming into care, if they get removed from their home, they're going into a foster family in another county. So they're changing schools immediately, losing their family immediately. They aren't placed together, so they're losing all of their siblings. And we have these parents that are living here that have to figure out how to get to parenting classes in Warrenton and treatment meetings, and they have to figure out how to get to the places where they are visiting with their kids. So that's a whole other group of people that have some transportation needs as well.
Wendy or Jenny, did you answer to that? Other transportation options except for the older?
Yeah, and actually, I've spoken to the probation office in Warrenton, and so they do have all of our information. As far as juveniles, so Voltran will transport adults. They will transport children that are supervised by an adult. So right now, Voltran does have volunteers in Rappahannock. So that is a possibility, but they would need to have an adult with them. And that's mainly because of insurance reasons. I can ask the question of them if something would arise, whether they would be able to transport someone who's 16. But for right now, the policy is adults. So, yeah, but we have had some people transported to probation. One of the things that we have that we do not widely advertise, and you'll know why, is we do have gas cards. And in order for someone to qualify for a gas card for help getting to their appointments, they have to have no other option. So we have to rule out public transportation and volunteer transportation. And usually that means that we've asked for a volunteer and they couldn't get one. And then we are able to give them a gas card. Right now we have a cap of $25 a month with a max of $100 in 6 months. Per person, right. And the reason why we do that is because we started seeing a trend, and we had 2 or 3 that just continuously called us and said, well, I need a gas card. They kind of learned that, well, if I make my appointment at a certain time, then nobody can take me, so I'll just keep doing that. So we started to kind of look at that trend, and we always want to give people a hand up, not a hand out. So that's kind of where we're at right now, but we do have a variance procedure. So if we should come across a scenario, we do have a person who We've heard from her doctor that this has been really instrumental in her treatment, and she is getting more than what the policy allows, but that doctor or that medical personnel had to fill out a variance and document why this person needed it. So there are processes, so we do have some things in place that can help out that situation.
Great.
Just to piggyback on, it kind of goes back to Randy's point in the beginning of the forum where transportation's kind of an afterthought. So if policymakers can start thinking of those things, like the prisoner reentry or when a prisoner is released, my understanding is, you're free to go, but they have no transportation to leave. Things like the juvenile system and the foster homes. Like, if we can start restructuring how people get to classes or what the requirements are, or at least consider transportation when you're creating those policies, that's going to be very helpful in trying to figure out transportation after you've already set up all of your protocols. So that's kind of a big part of this. And then if I can also just add Beth's point to helping the middle class too, and helping everybody, I do think if we can prevent isolation, so if someone's got transportation now, but then their eyesight goes, and then their spouse, used to drive all the time, and something happens to them, and then they get isolated, and then we're trying to work backwards. So if we can start preventing some of those things with the transportation we have now, that's also part of the solution, not just trying to help the folks that are already almost hopeless.
Yes, sir.
My name's Andy Johnston. I'm with the PATH Foundation. I sat quietly and listened because I wanted to listen and learn, not because I was hiding from the big responsibility of being the big foundation in the room. But we are committed to this issue of transportation. It's a part of my work portfolio, and I've worked with a number of folks in this room. I'll say first that I just appreciate this turnout and the passion of this community around this issue. Your desire to sort through it, work through it. And I also appreciated John Lozinski's straightforward comments. We have started to approach this more from his point to light approach, and so we've funded PAMS for some of their work. We're funding Aging Together for some of their work. We've helped ratchet up Voltran a little bit, and we've explored these other things like what Randy wrote about with Liberty Mobility Now, trying to see if there was a bigger, bolder solution. And you can see what the challenges are with that if you read the article. So we continue that work through this Mobility Council that we helped ratchet up. And I'm just really excited to be out here today to hear from you all. And I so appreciate the applause I got here. I heard for Wendy, because these are my transportation heroes. Hal, Wendy, Jenny, and now you, Randy, because this is incredible journalism that Rap News, Randy, Foothills Forum has put together around this. Thank you all very much.
Well, I think that's a good way to close it. Transportation heroes. There's a lot of them here today, and I think one thing we can take from this forum this afternoon is that there's no shortage of volunteers, as Jake said. It's just a matter of maybe everybody coordinating better. And I know Hal is now carrying that torch, and so we'll look forward to reporting in the Rappahannock News on more to come. So thank you everybody for being here. Randy Ryler, thank you, buddy. And Darcy, Jenny, and Dennis, thank you.
Thank you, John.